Hyvin niitä sitten tulee tänne ja äänikunnolla talteen, toivon mukaan ne on riittävän hyvin sitten tupeekottavaksi. Jos ei ole pahoitteluni mukaan.
Muistan sen. Mikä tavallaan teistä, että sä pääsit
mutta siis hän myös vaihtaa aina vaatetusta.
Se on aika paljon aina vesi kiinni. Jäi. Kirjaimellisesti. Välissä pessussa paidan sotkessa uudestaan. Mulla on se eteisä sillä, että siinä on kaikkia värejä. Mä katsoin sitä sun näkyy paskosen mitä se itse. Siis kaikki muu lähti, pikkasen jäi sitä rasvasta nokeaa jonnekin. Se oli näin, että sillä ei lähtenyt tein se tunti, jos ei lähde. Voi samalla alkusuora sisellä, että olisi ollut hyvä, niin kun olisi silleen käytetty, niin silleen mä oon tehnyt nää. Mä en halua sillä, että ne öljyä ja kaakaota ja mitä kaikkea.
Olet kyllä eväät hyviä asioita, jos harjoittelee itsessään. Siellä ne erityisesti lämmittää sieltä.
Niin on joka paikassa. Se ei ole. Sulla on pesä.
Good for you. Sen päivän.
Selvä.
All right, everybody. I think we are about to begin. Good evening and welcome to It Is Safe to Fear, supporting immersion in horror LARPs. My name is Valtteri Niskavaara and I'm a LARPer, nerd, and producer. And whatever in between. And in other life besides role-playing games, I work as a television cameraman and cinematographer, and I also have some experience through my studying from different genres, and horror being one of them. I'm also going to be talking somewhat from that experience also. But I have been arranging and organizing LARPs, and especially horror LARPs, for over 20 years now. And currently I'm running Dreamwalk LARP campaign, which is horror LARPs. And most of the things I'm going to be talking with you tonight is based on my own personal experience, and of course that's the only truth there is, and everything I'm going to talk about is objectively truth everywhere. So take everything with a little bit of grain of salt, and not everything is included in this because this is such a wide topic. So please forgive me if all the right opinions are not included. Let's get on with it. Oh, and by the way, if you want to get the presentation as a PDF, you can also, the QR code is also at the end of the presentation, so no need to take it now. And if you don't want to take write down things, you can always just download the PDF and get the presentation that way. All right. First of all, first I'm going to talk about a bit about what is horror in general and what makes horror LARPs different from maybe all the other genres of LARPing. And then we're going to talk about what are some of the ingredients of horror LARPs in general, what makes a horror LARP, and after that we're going to move on to different factors that can, in some cases, break fear, and what it means if fear as an emotion is broken during a LARP, especially. After that, we're going to move on into the beef of the actual presentation and talk about some of the tools I have written down that can support creating immersive fear in LARPs. And at the end, we're going to talk about I'm going to give you some hot takes and final tips and takeaways of all of this. First of all, what is horror in general? Horror is maybe one of the oldest forms of storytelling and tales that we have been talking and speaking as human beings, talking by the campfire, some ghost stories and so on, people telling cautionary tales of what lies in the darkness. And also, horror stories have always been really important ways of people expressing their fears of the current situations going on in the world. For example, historically, if you read some horror books, for example, you can always see some connection to the current climate in the world in that historical time. So horror is a good way of dealing and expressing and feeling in a safe way some of the fears that we actually are feeling in our own world. But what is a horror LARP then? The only and right and true ingredients of a horror LARP. Especially what makes immersive fear in horror LARPs? Not all LARPs with fear are horror LARPs, but all horror LARPs are, at least to some degree, about fear. And this is a hot take from me, that oftentimes I feel that we speak about LARPs as horror LARPs, even though they might actually be something different. Bear with me. Horror LARPs are often or always focusing somewhat on the feeling of fear, or creating the feeling of fear for the players. Often the origin of the fear is supernatural or otherwise unexplainable, something we cannot quite understand or don't know logically all the things involved in the source of fear. Whereas thriller larps then are often talked about as horror larps, even though I think they are a completely different thing. Thriller larps focus more on tension and suspense. Of course, tension and suspense are also included in horror larps, but this is, in my opinion, completely different from the feeling of fear. And thriller larps often focus on these tension and suspense through social and somewhat understandable elements. Something that we understand, the source of the fear or the danger is maybe a group of terrorists or a group of maybe even vampires, or something that we actually understand but are not something, is somewhat more tangible. Common elements of fear in general, not only in LARPs, fear of unexpected and unexplainable things that can harm you. Often fear is associated with the feeling of the need to survive and the feeling of survival in general, and something that endangers our own survival is something that causes us fear. Also, a good way of causing a fear in players is the feeling of helplessness. The feeling that even though I have this gun in my hand, I cannot do anything with that about the source of the fear or something, the danger in the darkness. I cannot fire, I cannot shoot at darkness. Or I can, but yeah, that doesn't necessarily help. Also, being forced into situations that you are not safe in fiction. We're going to be diving more into the safety later on. Someone is not feeling safe. It doesn't need to be like physical danger all the time. It can be like emotional or psychological danger that causes them not to feel safe. Not enough safety in a group, and this is, in my opinion, a very important point when creating horror LARPs. If you are in a large group, it creates the feeling of safety in a group, and it is really like instinctual thing that cannot be all the time affected in very meaningful ways. So being forced to face dangers by oneself or with only a small group is a good way of creating tension and fear. Feeling of impending doom. If you create a horror LARP and the players somehow learn, or the characters learn, that there is some time that the doom is coming, the monsters are coming through the walls. For example, when it gets dark, the monsters come out. This is a very typical way of creating fear and tension. There is a deadline to your safety. And of course, not only fearing for the safety of yourself, but also of your loved ones. So, how to build and maintain fear in a LARP, especially. The players must understand the fiction inside which the horror takes place. They must understand the framework you are all living in, the laws of the world that can cause you that suspension of disbelief. I don't know if you know the term. We're going to go into that more later on. But the players need to understand what are the laws of this world. What are the things that they know? What are the things they do not know or understand? And of course, always try to feed the players' own imaginations as much as possible, because the greatest horrors live in our imaginations. If you just plainly tell the players what the danger is, it is often not as effective if you just hint on the dangers they are going to be facing or they're going to be learning about in the world. The feeling of active fear usually cannot be maintained for long periods of time. This is very important when you're thinking about pacing in LARPs. It is important to build the tension during the LARP towards some kind of climax of the feeling of fear, which usually the climax is the point where the players are actively feeling the feeling of fear, if hopefully, of course. So if you are planning to have the climax or a release of the fear or tension early on in the story or the game, then it is very important that you think about what happens after that. Because if the feeling of fear gets released, it is really hard to build up the tension or the road towards another peak fear later on. It always gets harder and harder the further you go on and the more climaxes you have with the feeling of fear. Give the players some hints or anticipations of fear. This can be like sound cues, or it can be even like an NPC runs inside the building and tells about the horrors he has seen, but they are so traumatized that they are really incomprehensible, and you don't actually get much information other than something is lurking in the darkness and it is coming. It is coming. So drop some hints along the way. It can be from the before the LARP even, or during the LARP. Drop hints of the danger that the players are facing later on maybe. Soundscape and ambience is really good ways of building tension and building towards fear. I myself in my LARPs love to use ambience soundtracks or like different kinds of soundscapes that are built into the world. And it is also a good way of like setting the mood for the entire LARP and scenes that the players are going to be in. Of course, lighting in general, but especially darkness and low light are something that are good ways of enhancing the atmosphere of tension and fear. There are some exceptions, of course. If you have seen like Midsummer movie, it's a good example that it is really bright. There's always sun and always like everything's white and really bright. But even still, there is always like a feeling of fear and impending doom. But it is really hard to build that kind of atmosphere. It needs to be really enforced and really well designed to make it work, so that it doesn't make everything too like realistic. Darkness is a good way of hiding things and making dark corners where things might be lurking in. Creates areas of safety. Let the players know that, for example, inside this building you are safe. Nothing can harm you inside this building, and here you can just breathe and talk about your feelings with the other characters, and let them know that everywhere they don't need to fear for their life all the time. And sometimes, but use this very cautionary, you can always later on break that safety and make the players actually like lose their shit. In fiction, hopefully. But yeah, playing with the areas of safety, they can even change during the LARP. Maybe at the beginning of the LARP, everywhere that there is a light in is safe. But maybe later on, light doesn't even work anymore, and just this one sauna building is the place where you can be safe, or something like that. Or maybe the players need to move to a different location entirely to be safe again. But everything is about off-game communication and enough transparency for the players to actually feel safe. Not as a character, they don't need to feel safe as characters, but as players, they need to feel safe. They need to trust the organizers to keep them safe, and they need to feel that they are in safe hands in order to immerse themselves in the world, and especially if you want them to experience immersive fear. So, how do you break fear during LARPs? What not to do? if you want to achieve memorable ambience or feelings in a horror LARP. Immersive fear is really easy to break, unintentionally hopefully, and really hard to fix after breaking. If the players lose their immersion in a scene that is supposed to be very tense and fear-inspiring, if they lose their immersion, then it is really hard to get their trust back and get them back to the immersive space you want to build for them. Suspension of disbelief is really important in LARPs, but especially in horror LARPs, where we are playing with such intricate and so base emotions as fear. Suspension of disbelief means that you need to create a setting that the players understand and are willing to accept enough that they are willing to let go of their logical brain and not think about all the flaws of logic in the world, or wait a minute, there is no actual magic in the world. And you need to get them into the mindset where they believe in the world we're going to be living inside the frame of the LARP. It is especially important in horror LARPs, but all LARPs and storytelling in general. Immersion is also based on trust, whether it be trust on your co-players or trust in the organizers. It is, I cannot underline this enough, but without trust of the players for the organizers and their co-players, there is no immersion. I don't think so, or then there's something really funky going on. But if I imagine a lot of you LARPers might have been in situations where trust in your co-players or certain contacts might not have been the best possible, and God forbid if there's been situations where you don't trust on the game masters to keep everyone safe. There can be immersion breaking off and in-game events, of course. If you're in a fantasy setting and fearing for your life for there's some monsters in the darkness, and then the LARP venue's janitor comes in and says that they need to drain the sewage because the toilet is clogged or something like that. It can be a bit hard for the immersion. It's not, you can get over it, but it can be pretty hard if the scene that the janitor barges into is delicate or something. But also in-game events might, if the design is somewhat controversial or not well thought about, even in-game events can break immersion of the players. If something happens and the players feel that it doesn't fit into the narrative or the world that they are living in, or the suspension of disbelief, the laws of the world, then even in-game events can also break immersion. Two big groups. I don't know if has there been any of you who actually have organized horror LARPs? Just raise your hand if you have. Oh, this is awesome. Where are the horror LARPs? Why can I be a part of them? But yeah, you might not have noticed that if you organize a horror LARP for, let's say, 8 players, it is completely different thing than organizing a horror LARP for 50 players. There is safety in numbers that it is very hard to invoke fear in players if they are all the time in groups of, I don't know, 12 or 15. I myself organized once a LARP. First part was in a cabin for 8 players, and the next part was in a school for 30 players. And when we started the LARP and it was going on with the other organizers, we were, oh fuck, this doesn't work. The players are all the time running around in big groups and the design doesn't work at all, and we had to make changes on the fly. But yeah, it can be hard. You should think about how many players you're going to be taking into your horror LARPs. Also, causing too many base reaction moments for players. For example, excessive use of jump scares. I was planning on planting a jump scare at this point in the presentation, and I looked at it and I was like, no. I pretty much hate jump scares. I don't like them at all, and I usually tend to lean more towards like tension-building horror than like actual jump scares. But jump scares in horror LARPs happen unintentionally a lot of the times. When people are feeling the tension or feeling fear, even if someone just opens a door, another player, it can be like everyone just jumps the fuck, what the fuck? Yeah.
Yes, and especially if you're very physically immersed in the character, you might jump on like just basic regular movement. Your friend just tries to place a hand on your shoulder, you're like, what's going on?
Yeah, and that is something we should drive towards, the players feeling that kind of immersion, but it also can cause some problems if you, as organizers, arrange jump scares too much, so the players get like kind of numb for it all. So, effective ways of breaking immersive fear. Here is a simple list about it. Fearing for one's off-game safety. Have any of you been in situations like this that they have had to fear for their own safety, not as characters, but as players? I have. Yeah. A few hands, which is good. Not too many, because that means that the organizers have done something most of the time well. Seeing too much behind the scenes. This is a bit, some people don't mind it at all and can just ignore things that they see that they're not supposed to see. But if the players see too much behind the scenes, they see maybe the monster they are supposed to fear. They're going to talk with the organizers to get some counsel of some plot things, and they see the monster without their makeup, like dancing in the break room. It can be a bit counterproductive for the fear. Also, this is sometimes too much fear, too much meta information and off-gaming can also break fear or immersive fear, unless the game is specially designed in such a way that the players have access to a lot of meta information. But if you are playing really intense contact with another character and they are telling you about their off-game stuff all the time, it is really hard to get immersed in the world. I had one of these experiences last spring when I was playing in Poland, and I had one of my major contacts was pissed off game all the time, and she was just talking trash about the organizers all the time, and I was like, okay, thank you for this. For horror LARPs especially, someone starts to make too much fun of the fiction. Humor is a typical way of us normally dealing with emotions of fear or tension. There are a lot of examples. For example, people working with dead bodies often tend to have really black humor, and it is like a defensive mechanism. But in a LARP setting, if someone all the time, if there is a character that is somewhat humorous, if they tell jokes about the world all the time, it can be really destructive for the feeling of immersed fear among the group, because at some point it just starts to be frustrating. And even though they have a good reasons for their jokes, maybe they are scared shitless, but if they keep telling the jokes, it can be really counterproductive for the whole group. The buildup of fear reaches its peak too soon and is released. We talked about this a little bit earlier on also, but at some points it might be that if the buildup is that there is something in the darkness, but we haven't seen the monsters actually, and we just hear the monster and see what it has done or something like that. If the monster is shown too early on in the story, it can release the fear, and it can be really hard to get back to the level of tension and suspense later on if the players have already kind of experienced the climax of the source of their most basic, the biggest fear they have in the LARP. So you should be really careful about when to actually make the players reach the peak of their fear. And of course, losing faith in the fiction. If the players don't believe in the story or believe in the world anymore, I don't think they can build up to an immersive fear after that. Examples, totally not from personal experience. I have never done these myself. I have never experienced these as players in different LARPs or anything such. Raise your hands if you have similar experiences. The fiction changes into something completely different during the game. Genre hoax. Oh, hopefully not too early. No, lately, because this was somewhat of a common hoax at one point of LARPing history in Finland. Too many players for the concept of horror LARP, players moving as large groups all the time. Not too many? That's good. Good. Organizers leaning heavily in on off-game instructions during the game. Off-game, you all see a terrible and massive tentacle monster approaching. Yes, not very fear-inducing, maybe. Players are experiencing too much schedule pressure from the game. Need to hurry up with puzzles, etc., or the game breaks. Yeah, been there, done that. Players, organizers, drunk as a skunk and acting unexpectedly dangerously. Yes, seen that happen. Not in Poland, no. A player is told specifically they would not need to face their off-game phobias and are still forced to do so. Yep, been there, done that. Ruined my whole game. I was trying to be support person for the one player who was forced to face their fears. Organizers didn't react to it anyway. Players losing their trust in the organizers providing a safe experience for all. Yep. Not too many hands, and I'm really glad about that. So, here are the only possible tools for supporting fear in your LARPs. How to create safe environments to feel fear. Communication. And now comes all the points why communication is so important. Be direct about the ground rules and eventualities of the game. Characters may die during the game. How, why, when? When can they expect to be in danger of actually losing their lives? How they might die, and so on. In what ways can players influence the world or their fate? Make it clear if the players cannot save the world, or if they cannot actually kill the monster or whatever. Make it clear so that they know what the framework that they're going to be playing in is. Are there predetermined eventualities, or is everything up to the players? Can the players just freely improvise and see where everything is going, or is there some ground rules or definite no-nos that the game designers want to impose on them? What safety mechanics and tools are at players' disposal? How to play violence, workshop if needed. What meta techniques are used? What kind of safety meta techniques they can rely on? Are there off-game safe rooms, support available during game? Often in horror LARPs, people might, even though they would be really well prepared for the LARP, they might feel really overwhelmed during the LARP. They might get emotionally really overwhelmed and need to just a little moment to have a break and not think about the world of the LARP and just breathe in a place where they know that they cannot be hurt, even though they, as players, know that they will not be in physical danger themselves. Is there any kind of talking support, tukijatorva in Finnish, but support persons available during the LARP? Design. What possible triggering themes are included? Make it plain to the players what are the themes the game is going to be focused on, and what are the themes or triggering themes that are especially excluded from the LARP. Typical themes could be like racism. This game doesn't involve, we don't play about racism in this game, or something like that. Make it very clear, especially what themes are excluded specifically. What are the moods and feelings the game is designed to convey? This is a really hard part for me, especially in my experience. It is sometimes really hard to let the players know what the game is actually about. What are the feelings that we feel the players should feel during the LARP? What is the mood? What is the, in general, what is the mood of the game? Sometimes it can be really hard to pinpoint, and players might still understand things differently, so it is difficult. Are there some guidelines for good player conduct, best practices? In some LARPs, I have not done this myself, but in some LARPs there have been like a list of things that they wish the players will, how they will behave, for example, towards other players and such. Yeah.
Question about the characters being died in the game, how and when. I think like this, for me, it would break immersion quite well. Somebody like the game master or the organizer would come in the room and say, beyond that next door people may die. So how would you convey that in the game itself?
Yeah. For example, in some LARPs they have used these light fixtures. They put like a blue light next to a door, so the players will know that if they cross this door, they are in danger of losing their lives as characters. There are plenty of ways to do this, but the most important thing is that the players are not surprised if their character dies. That is really important. It is really shitty to go into a LARP and halfway through you just walk through a wrong door and there is a monster waiting and kills you right off. I don't think that's a good design choice, but yeah, there are plenty of ways, and lighting fixtures and like different marks for doors or whatever are used plenty of times. Yeah, character death. Now we're going to this more. When are the characters in danger of dying? Try to convey, tell them like, your characters don't die during the first half of the LARP, but at the later half of the LARP they might die. And if possible, leave the decision if the character dies to the player. If they get damaged or injured, try to make it so that the player can actually decide themselves if their character actually dies or if just like really critically wounded. Of course, this is not possible in all designs, but yeah. Can players kill other player characters? What rules apply? This is a really good thing, and most of the time I recommend let the players discuss this off game before making the decision. So what kind of rules apply? Can anyone kill anyone during any time of the LARP, or is it there some ground rules when players can be killed? Where to go after dying? I'm going to go a bit faster now because we're running out of time. What is known, what is not? What info may be discovered, what not? A bit about the things we already talked about. Let the players know what is possible in the world and what is not. Where and how can the orcs be reached for consultation? Pretty plain stuff. Off-game safety. Where can the players find help, medical aid, fire extinguishers, etc.? All of these things are important for the players to feel safe in the venue. Even though they might never need to know where the actual fire extinguishers are, it is still like gives them a sense of safety. Are there any off-game tripping hazards or something like that in the gaming area? Good to know. Players can also be prepared for the LARP before the actual LARP happens through character design, writing, make the characters mean something for each other, and that way you can make the players fear not only for themselves but also for their friends. What if they lose their friends? Have enough fear hooks in the character writing for the characters to easily clasp onto. Maybe ask the players questions like, what do you see in the darkness when you stare at it for too long? What do you see in your nightmares? What are the characters' worst fears? You can even give the players some pre-game tasks or homework to do before the LARP. They don't have to actually like write down anything. You don't need to check their homeworks or anything like that, but just try to make the players think about different aspects of the LARP before the game and try to get their in the right mindset of the fear you're trying to invoke in the players. Have the players prepare for the possibility of death of their character and think about it. Write some simple questions for the players to think about before the game. What do they fear the most? What is the worst that could happen them during the LARP or the events of the fiction? In Dreamwalk, for example, for some characters, I have asked them to actually write their last will and testament in paper, and if the character dies during the game, they will be delivered to their contact persons. And it is a really good way to make the players fear, or the characters fear for their safety, because they know that this might actually get to be used, this last will and testament during the game. Final tips, hot takes to consider. And these are supposed to be a bit, hot takes. Players do not need to know everything about the LARP fiction, but let them know about the level of transparency. The players should know what they sign up for. Maybe not that controversial thought, but yeah, it is always, in my opinion and in my experience, it is always better to give them more information about the game design than to leave them in the dark about things that might come as surprises to the players and not only for the characters. Let them know that what are the things that you will not reveal to the players beforehand, and what are things that have had access to. You may even deliberately try to trick the players into believing something that is not true in the fiction, but you have to be damn sure you have their trust and you do not abuse that trust. Excluding maybe genre hoaxes. Don't do genre hoaxes, please. It is better to have redundancy in safety mechanics than leave the players feeling confused or feeling unsafe during the LARP. I know that in some games there might be too many meta techniques or too many safety mechanics used, and the players just get like overwhelmed about all the mechanics being used. But in my opinion, it is better to have too many than too few safety mechanics, especially. The players don't have to use all of them, but the important thing is that when the adrenaline is pumping and when the players are really in tense mode, they have some kind of safety mechanics they can get their mind to think about. There can be even different safety mechanics for the same thing, like, for example, traffic lights, and there can be different things that do the same thing. It is better to have redundancy than to have too few. Also, it is better to have redundancy in safety planning in general, especially for the venue in question in case of emergency. It is always better to think about, okay, who of the organizers is capable of first aid? Which one of the organizers' car is easily accessible in case of emergency that we need to get fast someone to hospital or something like that? What is the address of the venue if you need to call 911 or 112 in Finland? Players can act really unpredictably when they are experiencing fear and adrenaline is pumping. There's like, I have personally been hit multiple times with weapons and once kicked in the head when the player was just in so adrenaline infused situation that they were just reacting, and I was trying to like break the situation. So be prepared for the players to actually do whatever when they are in adrenaline-infused modes and be flexible about it. But also let the players know that it is okay if they are going into such moods that they are just reacting like with base instincts. But you have to, as organizers, be prepared to also intervene if things get out of hand. If the players just are in like in such a mood that nothing gets through them and they are acting really unsafely, you need to be prepared to intervene in such situations so that danger can be avoided. One of the worst feelings players can get in a LARP is to feel like they were not good enough, failed as players when their character faces difficulties. A good example is punishing the players dying because something happens in the fiction, and the player being left to feel like they made a mistake as a player and not as a character. So it can be somewhat tricky to avoid this entirely, and people react differently to different scenarios, but try to avoid scenes that can easily be experienced in such ways. It is something I am personally trying to learn all the time when organizing LARPs in general, but especially in horror LARPs. Let the players know it is okay to feel anything and show it. It is okay to feel sad if their character faces an awful fate. It is also okay to feel emotionally wrecked after the game. But it is okay if they feel nothing at all. Horror LARPs are really difficult to organize, and most of the time, not everyone is going to be reaching that peak fear, immersive fear, or whatever. They might even have fun, but they didn't really get emotionally invested in the game. Or they had just the worst LARP of their whole life. It is okay, and we cannot always please everyone. So, making a horror LARP that works for everyone is really hard, if not impossible, like all LARPs in general. So be kind to yourself and your players. Questions? I have like 2 minutes. Yeah.
Could you give some examples about, like, when you said that the player feels that they failed as a player and not as a character? So that kind of, I don't know, what did you mean by that?
Yeah. For example, like the game design is planned in such a way that, for example, if some characters decide to face like a monster, they decide to go and try to hunt the monster. If they do it and don't run away from it when they know that their guns are not actually working, and they just try to go and punch the monster, and the monster just like messes them up, and the character maybe even dies there. The player can feel that they made a mistake as a player and not as a character, even though it was like maybe even told straight to their faces that you cannot kill this monster. It will kill you if you go and punch it. But these kinds of situations, does it?
Yeah, what is your solution then?
Make it clear to the players that even afterwards, that this was not something that you did as a player, but as in the fiction, this was unavoidable when your character made this choice to go on there. It was not you as a player, but your character made these choices, and so on. There's a thin red line there, but you can work it. Yeah. One more question. Yeah.
Well, this is not actually a question, it's a comment about, because this is a safety issue, but if you have multiple overlapping safety mechanics, there is a possibility that a player A remembers one and a player B remembers the other one, and there will be a miscommunication, and it can be very awful for the players.
Yeah.
So that's why there should be more like carefully thought out few mechanics that build the whole.
Yes, that is a good point, and in most of the time it works, but in horror LARPs especially, people tend to lean towards something that they remember most clearly. So they might even use safety mechanics that are not used in the game if the adrenaline is pumping and they feel like unsafe as a player. They might just yell, "Red, red," and the traffic light mechanism isn't even used in the LARP. So in that kind of mindset, too much is too much, but too few is like not good also. And you might even ask the players if they feel okay about these mechanics or if they need something more. Okay. Yeah, we can talk later. But thank you all. It is safe to fear. And if you want to download the PDF for the notes, you can do it from there. Thank you all and see you in the horror LARPs.